Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello.
I have 2 o'clock by my watch, so we'll get started. We got some committee members still filing in, but that's okay because the beginning of this is always the same. Some house rules. Please keep your camera on if you're part of the committee. Please mute yourself unless you are speaking. Also know that the chat function is disabled except for the committee members. We please ask that the committee members refrain from using the chat function unless it's for the good of the order. We will take a break, about 5 to 10 minute break, about halfway through. There is a timer function that we will be utilizing for anybody that wants to speak from the general public. There will be a timer function on that. And then I'll just go over quickly the Robert's Rules of Order. So anybody that is not familiar with those and from the general public, you become familiar with those. So the proposal will be introduced by the moderator, which is myself. We will ask the proponent to introduce himself and give us a brief summary of the proposal. We will then ask the general public if anybody wants to speak in support of that proposal. They will have 2 minutes to do so. We will then go to the general public on anybody who wants to speak in opposition of the proposal. They will also have 2 minutes to do so. From there, we'll go back to the committee to ask questions about the proposal. From there, we go back to the general public for any rebuttals in support or any rebuttals in opposition. Rebuttals are limited to 1 minute each. From there, back to the committee for any discussion or for any motions. So that's how we're going to be doing some things today. The agenda is up on the screen. The way we communicate here is by raising our hands via the Zoom function. So I ask that if you can see the screen with the agenda, please raise your hand. That's how we communicate. Even people in the general public, that's how we know you want to speak. So please raise your hand if you're in the general public as well. I'll give us a few minutes to do that and a few minutes for other people to join. Good, I'm seeing hands going up, so that's great. Okay, go ahead and lower your hands. And just a point of reference today, we have Kyra and Kristen on the line. They are going to be our note takers and our subject matter experts. So just keep that in mind. For the first item of business, which is P34.9, just a reminder, we discussed this during the last hearing. It was tabled. So we will not go through the public comment portion of this, but we will ask the proponent to give us a brief summary again about the proposal so you all can refresh your memory on that. And then we will go straight into the discussion portion with the committee. So let's see, Lindsay is on, I believe. Kristen, I see your hand up. I don't know if you had a question before we got started.
Yep, just real quick. We have a guest, Colin Bell, that I don't have on our committee list. Just wondering if you're filling in for somebody.
I was asked to come in regard to the stormwater proposal.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, and sorry, I missed like the first 30 seconds. What was the format for presenting that, Kevin?
Sure. So, Colin, I'll move you over to an attendee, but you have 2 proposals, 34.10 and 34.11, that you'll be giving us a summary on. And during that time, I'll allow you to talk. But since you aren't a voting member, I'll move you over to the attendee side so you won't have your camera on, but you will be allowed to talk during that time to give us a summary and answer questions.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else before we get started? Oh, Eric, I see one more hand. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Moderator. I wanted to mention that we will be having our first and potentially only supplemental / hearing meeting on, Kurt, you help me out. Is it Tuesday? The
May 3rd, yes.
The 3rd. Thank you very much. On Tuesday, the 3rd, for about 90 minutes, and we're calling this a supplemental hearing simply because there are a small number of proposals that are The best way I could describe them would be impactful but not controversial, maybe, is how I would like to describe those. And so because we, quite frankly, don't have a ton of time left in our formal hearings like the one today, we're going to pull a few of them to the side. City staff members will be having a conversation. Anyone and everyone that is, on this committee now is welcome and encouraged to join if you can. Apologies for the late notice, but we will be sending out correspondence here in just a minute or two, and would invite you to participate if you'd like. The agenda is posted online to indicate what those proposals are. And again, it's a less formal, more conversational kind of, thumb to the wind, yay or nay on a small handful of proposals that we really just won't have time for in committee. So I did want to mention that before we moved into our formal agenda today. Thank you.
What time is that meeting, Eric?
It will start at 10:30 and go for 90 minutes. And we may not need 90 minutes, but that's what we'd like to allocate.
It's not
That's
posted.
the one already on our calendar then. I was thinking it was a second one, so that's why I was asking.
I think some city staff team members may have that blocked on their calendar. We need to make sure that we get it out to everyone on the committee.
Yep.
So again, it's not mandatory, and we understand we're asking for a little more time of your valuable time and expertise. And if you can and would like to participate, you're obviously encouraged. And if not, that's okay.
Okay, we have another hand up. Adam, go ahead.
Thanks, Kevin. Is that going to be on the same webpage as our agenda is put up? Because I don't see it now.
It will be put up hopefully by tomorrow. It'll be under the Denver Green Code hearings, and then there'll be a supplemental space, which will have an agenda there. The IECC committee has a similar structure as well, so you can kind of see that as an example right now.
Okay, thanks, Courtney.
And
Okay,
Courtney,
anything else?
did you want to mention, Courtney, just real quick, those proposals that we will like to talk about? I think it was just, was it 4 or 6 maybe? Just real
Yeah.
quick, the committee
Sure.
understands, even though we don't have the agenda immediately available.
Yeah, we're looking at doing one about automatic flare controls, gray water systems in city facilities, lighting control requirements for presentations, and then outcome focused development. And then potentially based on our progress today, we may add or shift a little bit from what we accomplished in today's hearing.
Thanks, Courtney.
And that is open to the public as well?
Yes, they are intended to be open. Anyone that would like to participate, there will be an email that's cpdcommunications@denvergov.org. All they need to do is drop us an email and we can send them the invitation, or the Zoom link is what I should say. Yep, so any member of the public that wishes to speak in favor of or against a particular item is welcome to attend.
All right, thanks. So without further ado, we'll get started. Let's see, Lindsay, looks like you're unmuted now. I'm going to pull up your proposal. If you would please give us a brief summary again, just to refresh the committee's memory about this proposal that was tabled last time. Please keep it to a summary on this proposal, and you have the floor.
Great, thanks, Kevin. This is Lindsay Rogers. I'm a water policy analyst with Western Resource Advocates. And during the last meeting, I presented this proposal to make some amendments to the plumbing fixtures and fittings section that would make certain plumbing fixtures more water efficient than what's in the current green code. So specifically updates to toilets, urinals, residential bathroom sinks, and residential shower heads. Not going to run through all of the numbers here because I see that you have them all in front of you. But what I'd like to do is spend just a minute or two talking about a couple of the questions that came up. So the first question that we got last time was around sort of the availability of the ultra high efficiency toilets. And we did some more sort of market analysis around this and found that the two largest toilet manufacturers, Kohler and American Standard, they both manufacture 1 gallon, 1.0 gallon valve type toilets. We also found a number of different brands beyond the Niagara Stealth, which we talked about and which has been pretty commonly used in Denver and by different rebate programs, that have 0.8 gallon tank type toilets, as well as the valve type toilets. So some of those include Aquasource, Toto, Ferguson, Tynan, Contract, Caroma. These range pretty widely in cost. I can say the Niagara Stealth is $179 at Home Depot right now, pretty well aligned with a standard higher water use toilet. So just wanted to mention some of the product out there on the market. And then for the waterless urinals, there were a few questions that came up around how these work and their efficacy. So the waterless urinals are designed to be very sloped and very smooth so that they can use gravity and a specially designed trap chamber that's filled with a liquid sealant to send waste down the drain. The sealant is lighter than water, and that's why it doesn't evaporate, and it's designed to help with the odor control. There was some talk about whether those chemicals used in the product were harmful. And according to my research, those sealants are primarily made of oils, of vegetable oil or canola oil, and then some kind of fragrance. I read a number of product safety data sheets and seen no toxicity concerns beyond mild skin sensitization or allergy. The product used to clean these waterless urinals, they're cleaned differently from a standard urinal. They actually don't get cleaned with water. They get cleaned with, a soft sponge or cloth and a simple household cleaning solution. So I wasn't seeing anything around concerns of harsh chemical use in these. We also had the issue of odor come up. I found a couple of studies, one from the University of South Maine that found that the urinals that they installed, waterless urinals, were easier to keep clean and created fewer odors than their conventional urinals. And then another study out of UC Los Angeles concluded no statistically significant differences in odor existing between the two waterless and flush type urinals. Odors were more a function of urine on floors and surrounding surfaces than the type of urinal. I didn't see anything around a need to have additional ventilation or any kind of research around that for those waterless urinals. It seems like really this is more about maintaining them properly. So refilling that sealant after 1,500 flushes and infrequently replacing the removable trap cartridges. So they need to be cleaned, again, without water, using the right products, and maintained effectively, as all of our fixtures do, to prevent that issue. Product availability, there's a company called Sloan and also Kohler that makes these. I'm seeing costs starting around $250 all the way up to $1,000. The Sloan product was right around $300. So again, pretty in line with what we see on the market for flush type urinals. And I will go ahead and pause there.
All right, thank you for that summary. I'm gonna put you back on mute. And we will go back to the committee now. So just a refresher that this was tabled last time. Everybody had an opportunity to speak in support or opposition. So we will forego that part and go straight into the discussion or a motion category of the hearing. So Cheryl, your hand's up first, go ahead.
Can you,
Cheryl,
okay?
you're on mute. There you go.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
There you are. Try again. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Hear me now?
There you are.
Give me.
Let's try it.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Good.
can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. So since I spent some time doing research on this, and I actually had a couple of questions I wanted to ask. Was that since the unmodified language is part of the DGC 2019, Christy, I was curious what the adoption date of that measure has been.
I'm sorry, you kind of broke up and I'm not sure I understood the question.
Do you know how many projects have gone after that provision?
Oh, okay, thank you. I don't have any good data on that because we don't have any projects that are following the Denver Green Code as written pilot path. So I'm gonna go with probably none because we didn't have limited mandatory use for 2019. We just had the 5 pilot projects, which became 6 pilot projects, and they're just not using the as written path.
Okay. The next question I had is down in the supporting information section under substantiation and works. The statement that says many of the original fixture volumes in the DGC have been shown to be readily available at little to no cost increase. I'm curious what data that statement is based off of.
Can I jump in and ask a quick question for point of order? I just want to make sure Lindsay is available to answer these questions. She's on the public side and she's not able to respond to the questions and be part of the discussion. So I was hoping we can bring her back in.
Sure. So we would have to take a vote from the committee because we already did the question period and finished that last hearing. So if the committee feels strong enough, we can take a vote on that if we want to have her open back up for speaking. So let me see. Let me write down the order here real quick. We got Adam, John, Austin. All right, let's go ahead and lower our hands real quick. We'll come back to that and we'll just vote on that real quick. All those in favor of allowing Lindsay to answer questions, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing 9. Okay, so go ahead and lower your hands back. We'll take Lindsay off mute, and Lindsay, please stick to just answering the questions that are brought forth on that. So if you can answer, Lindsay, the question about where this sentence on the screen in the supporting information, where you got that info from.
This substantiation is based on the market research, much of the market research that we talked about last time. So similar research around the DGC recommendations. What is the availability? How many manufacturers are providing these fixtures? What access is there to them? What's the cost comparison of these fixtures compared to standard fixtures at this point?
The
Okay,
question
Cheryl,
I
does that
have
answer your question?
For now, yeah. The last question I have is the very last sentence. The sentence right after that says the original DGC should be moved to the DBC and updated with these more stringent standards. If we vote to approve this amendment, are we just voting on modifying the language for the DGC, or are we voting on doing what that sentence says and moving the current language into the DBC?
So I can answer that. We're only voting on increasing stringency in the DGC. We're not voting on putting anything into a mandatory code. Those codes that would be affected would have to be voted on separately. And it would be by the committees that are updating those mandatory codes.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I'm good with comments. I have more for discussion, but I'll let the other committee member, the hearing members, speak first.
Okay, and Cheryl, if you want to work on your connection, you're a little bit choppy there in the meantime, but we'll go to the next person. Adam, your hand's up next.
Thanks, Kevin. I've got a whole, I don't know when this was discussed. I'm fairly certain I was at the last meeting. Maybe it was after 5 p.m. But I actually have a lot to say on this. I'll start at the beginning and work my way down. I see that 1.1 was originally proposed. I think that we should keep 1.1 because it's 0.1 gallons per flush, and it offers a ton more options in terms of purchasing, especially on the commercial market for water closets. The 0.8 is a little frightening. I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm just thinking about the water closets now with the flushing meters, because that's mostly what I work with and what I see on my projects. The other thing is on item D, public lavatory faucets. Maximum flow rate shall not exceed 0.25 GPM. I don't know that there's a 0.25 aerator readily available on the market. I think that should be 0.35. And the one underneath it says per metering cycle, so that's fine on number E. And then lastly, I would like to talk about, there's a lot of studies, especially one by PERC, which is a fairly well-known water organization, that talks about the slope of the piping and the arrangement of the fixtures in the restrooms in order to maximize flow from these low flow fixtures. I think if we don't address that in this proposal, we're going to have people that are uninformed and not happy about the results of low flow fixtures. And also the distance from the restrooms to the sewer is the third thing. So those are all my concerns, and I'm sorry that I missed this original discussion, but this is a pretty huge thing to be addressing in a drought prone region like the one we live in. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, next hand up is Jonathan.
So my question is, it seems as though this would potentially forbid toilets with integrated washlets, which I feel like we're starting to see a lot more of now. And I don't know how that water usage is captured or dictated by this, but essentially I'm assuming it would just fall under the 1.0 gallons that you're allowed to use per flush. So I was wondering whether maybe the proponent could speak to that, or I don't know whether Christy or somebody has an idea of where that falls under all of this.
Thanks,
Let's go
Jonathan.
to Lindsay. She had her hand up there that can answer that.
Maybe quickly, my understanding is that those toilets that you're referring to actually aren't allowed at this time under Regulation 86, which is Colorado's gray water statute, although that regulation is currently being reviewed, and there's discussion about legalizing, making that another usable form of gray water. I've also seen them around Denver, so maybe someone else can speak to that. I don't know. That's just what my understanding is from the regulation. But assuming that those are legal and allowed in Denver, we certainly wouldn't want to disincentivize the use of those forms of toilets. I unfortunately don't have on hand gallons per flush for those washlet toilets.
All right, next hand up is Christy.
So just layering on to what Lindsay said, my understanding is also that those are not currently legal under Regulation 86. And then I just wanted to respond to part of Adam, your comments. The 0.8 versus 1.1 getting outside of vast market availability, I would propose that is okay for the Denver Green Code, because the Denver Green Code is people choosing which provisions they wish to comply with from the chapter, to try to drive the market and try to tell the market what we want more of, so that the market can then react, so that if something like this were to become mandatory, then the market would be there to respond and provide what's needed. We would not move this to mandatory code without having a whole nother round of conversation. And at that point, market availability is of high value and importance to us, where we would want things to be readily available for everybody to access them. But right now, the Denver Green Code serves multiple purposes, and part of it is to just express what we want to see more of. And if there are available 0.8s, but the big manufacturers aren't making them, it would be really awesome to create a demand that makes the big manufacturers recognize that they really should start making them and start offering them. Now, on the functional questions, I've heard different things about this not creating a problem with the plumbing slopes, but I am not a plumbing engineer, and so it is not fair for me to have much of an opinion. It is concerning to hear a suggestion that these toilets would need plumbing sloped at a different rate that would not be addressed by the designers and the contractors, and that we would then have problems in buildings. I just had understood differently from the research that had been shared with me previously. So if there are other thoughts on that, I would welcome hearing them, because that's an unresolved concern then.
Next hand up is Renee.
Hi, I feel like we're trying to strike a balance between A, not wanting to flush twice and use double the water, and B, not wanting fixtures to be replaced that don't function, or they don't meet the requirements of and desires of the maintenance staff. We work on a lot of airports and some convention centers with people going through them, 100 people in an hour or something like that. And the idea of saying, oh, we're only going to allow non-waterless urinals is really, I'm sure I can't convince my clients to do that. So I guess the question is, I think 0.125 is still like only 1/8 of a regular, which is 1.0, and it's pretty dang good. I would prefer that we keep 0.125 for the urinals as an option, and then you can still have another option of non-flush. But on the water bottle refilling stations, item J, I'd kind of prefer those to be at every single drinking fountain, because that's where we're going. Everybody needs to be responsible and bring their water bottle with them, and it would encourage more of that if they were everywhere. So those are my two comments. We got to go as low as possible, but not make it non-maintainable or make people flush twice. So I'm not sure quite what that balance is. If there's some studies out there that are not by manufacturers to suggest what that optimal flow rate is, I don't know. There probably are some, but I don't have access to them or know where they are right now. It's been a long time since I did that research.
Okay, thank you, Renee. Next up is Antonio.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have a few things on this one. I'll just start briefly on a few of them. I know that we've given, the proponent gave a few details of some pricing and so forth. I was wondering what consideration, or if any, has been taken to the actual cartridge, because while we priced the waterless urinals, I get that, but these cartridges can go anywhere from $40 up to, well, $1,000, $1,200. And not to mention that these cartridges need to be replaced every 3 to 6 weeks. You also need a special tool to do this. So I was wondering if that cost analysis incorporates that. I don't believe it does. Can we get verification?
Sure, I'll allow Lindsay to follow up with that.
I'm seeing similar costs of cartridge replacement, which actually not all waterless tank models require replacement cartridges. Some of them work differently, where the cartridges don't have to be replaced, they have to be cleaned. I'm seeing $40, $50 as well. I don't have on hand how frequently these need to be replaced. I would imagine it's very, very much related to the use that the bathroom gets, obviously.
So something that's used quite a bit is going to be changed more often. The other research that I was able to find is that if these are not taken care of and the cartridges are not addressed, well, then the smell is very, very difficult to handle, which leads me into my next question. You mentioned they can use household cleaners. Well, okay, well, I know a lot of people who use Clorox, and I know a lot of people who use different chemicals in cleaning their restroom. Obviously, that's their throne, their areas. They want those nice and clean. How can we guarantee that we're not putting, contaminant down the drain? And last part, I just I'll let you answer that one first, and then I have one more for you.
I think I'm not quite sure the distinction you're making between a waterless urinal and a flush urinal that could potentially use those same household cleaners and products.
You have a good point, but the point being made is that those chemicals could still go down. Obviously, urine has a lot of gases that it'll emit, and it can be problematic with copper. Is there any studies that you can find with that being associated? Again, it is waterless, so the gases will, obviously affect the piping and the plumbing. Is there any research that you can provide or to the committee or information on that?
I haven't seen anything in the research I've done around those challenges or those being raised as concerns.
Okay, I'll get back to you on that. I think I have 4 or 5 sightings from references on that.
Okay, Antonio, looks like, are you done there? I saw you go off or go back to mute.
I am, yes. Thank you so much, and thank you for answering that question. I appreciate it.
Okay, next up we have Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to give a little insight onto what Denver Water has experienced with mostly with the 0.8 gallon per flush toilets over time. We have run a program in the past called our Water Sense Challenge, where we work with apartment complexes and large condo complexes and HOAs and places like that, installed hundreds of 0.8 gallon per flush toilets through a third party. And to date, we have not experienced any drain line carry issues that are due to the 0.8 gallon per flush toilets. Some places that I have read about where 0.8 gallon per flush toilets do run into problems, it is more the slope in the ground of the sewer infrastructure that is causing the issue and not the toilets themselves. So that is just to the tank water closets in part B. And I'm going to find EPA where you can look for all WaterSense products and sort them by gallons per flush and things like that. So we can look at this, or others can kind of poke around and kind of see how many of these different types are available in the marketplace right now. I personally don't have any issue with lowering the gallons per flush on any of these, and agree with just kind of the thought that we should continue to push for water efficiency. And from my experience with the programs that Denver Water has run, we have not run into issues using the most efficient ones on the market. The things to really look for, in my opinion, is making sure that they meet the MAP score, which is how well a toilet does removing grams of solids from the bowl and pushes it into the sewer system. And as long as it has a high MAP rating, I think those toilets are market ready, and we installed with very little pushback.
Thank you. Next up is Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to build off of what Austin said. From those programs that installed the 0.8 gallon per flush toilets, they also had 1.5 gallon per minute shower heads and 0.5 faucet aerators. So all of the most ultra efficient products out there on the market. and Denver Water did about 25 large buildings and about 50 smaller, medium-sized buildings. And did not have drain line carry issues, did not have any callbacks for replacement of products, and did not see, the double flushing that people, sometimes complain about. There was definitely water savings that was expected, and actually beyond the water savings that we expected in those buildings when we ran those programs. And there's another program too. I think this goes to what Christy was talking about, the pilot program that is working with new development was primarily focused on getting these products into market. And I think Austin could talk a little bit more about this, but when I managed that program, we had about 30 buildings participate in it, and they were all able to find those ultra high efficiency products. They were able to find them at cost. I think the hardest thing was actually communicating between the developer to their subs to make sure that they got this is what we're requiring. Once they knew the requirement, they did very well at actually finding them in the marketplace. And none of them complained about costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jonathan.
This is to follow on Renee's comment about the bottle filling stations being at 100% of the water fountains, which I think is a good point. But what I'm wondering is whether it's really just a language thing, because often water fountains would be a high-low, and so there would be two there. You wouldn't necessarily need two bottle filling stations at like a double water fountain. So maybe it's just that we say that at any location where there is a water fountain, that we'd have a bottle filling station. However the percentages work out on the whole project may not necessarily be the relevant metric, I guess.
Thank you. Next up is Cheryl.
Video helps my that any better?
Not
Can
a
you hear
whole
me
lot
okay?
better.
Hear me at all?
So Cheryl, yeah, go ahead, Cheryl. We can hear you right now.
Okay. So I reached out to contractor their input on this. So for context, I'm talking from the perspective of commercial projects, which would include family hospitality. We're talking where between 25 and 5 toilets. So projects, right? So one point of information.
Cheryl,
between
Cheryl, I'm gonna cut you off. We still don't have a good connection. If you want to try calling in on your cell phone, that's what I always do, and just put in headphones that way. My cell phone connection is always a little bit better. I don't know if that's what you use or not, but you might want to try that one, see if that's any better. But we'll come back to you, and we'll go to the next person's hand, which is Austin.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump back in real quick and continue on with what Jeff said on the new development side. We haven't had anybody have trouble finding the current standards, and I believe with a little bit of help sourcing initially, most development teams would have no trouble with these new standards either. But we've had great success. We've had a lot of developers actually go above and beyond what's listed in here. And again, we haven't heard any drain line carry issues come up to date.
Okay. Daniel, your hand's up next.
Hi, I just want to repeat what I said before. I so appreciate all the expert information and feedback. And, I can't provide any of that, but I can speak to the structure of the code and the way this proposal is worded. And it's worded as an amendment to the mandatory provisions. I don't know, Christy could maybe speak to whether that could be changed even after we voted in. I would, I'm a strong proponent of it if it weren't mandatory, because as a mandatory provision, any project that is not going to be able to do this for any reason, like you said, an airport that, you know, has some maintenance concern or whatnot, is therefore driven away from the entire code. Because if you can't comply with a mandatory, you know, it's sort of like when you look at the lead, and you know, most of the provisions are not mandatory, very few are mandatory, because if you don't custom tailor how you achieve compliance with the overall code to each project, and you have something that's mandatory for all projects, then you're essentially cutting out some projects. So as a you know, an achievement, sure, this would be phenomenal as an option that you get credit for and can help you comply with the code. But as a mandatory for every project that wants to utilize this code, I think we would lose projects potentially that would otherwise attempt to use this code and provide lots of energy benefits, you know, landscaping, all this other stuff we were working on that those projects can do. Is going to be lost if they feel that they cannot attempt this code because of this being mandatory. Thank you.
So I can speak to that, and I would ask Eric to reconfirm what I say here because it's a process comment. So we have specifically, since the first hearing on Denver Green Code, said ignore whether or not it's listed as mandatory elective, because we're going to determine what should be mandatory and elective at the end. And so I think everybody has been sort of ignoring that, and that was our intent. And I think maybe in one case we started saying, well, on this one, the proponent is saying that it really should be mandatory, and so we should consider it in that context. But otherwise, it was not our intention that through this process of voting on these provisions, we make things mandatory or elective. That was not the intent. So I might suggest that for this one, when we vote on it with a stipulation that says whether or not we are making a recommendation specifically relative to mandatory versus elective status, so that we are all aligned, because there are opinions on that. With the other ones, the intention is that at the end of the process, NORESCO is helping us with an analysis to figure out how to align pilot program projects that pursue Denver Green Code as written with an approximate level of benefit equivalent to LEED Platinum. And the mandatories and electives are going to follow that analysis. So we really can't, through this process, vote on what's mandatory and elective unless we see a specific problem with one, and we just want to say, I'm not going to support it unless we keep it elective. Then let's differentiate. But otherwise, this process is not for that division. That's going to happen at the end.
That's very helpful. Can I ask another question of the proponent? I've heard some concern specifically about the urinal. That's the only fixture here that's proposed to be waterless, non-water. What would the proponent propose for to substitute that if someone were to, you know, if the committee were to want to have that it would have water? What would the gallon, you know, the efficient gallon per flush be?
So Daniel, I will say that the proponent had to drop off after the first 20 minutes, so she's no longer on the call and can't answer that, but I'll open it up to the committee if anybody else feels that they can answer that.
I think it's 0.125. It's, you know, still 1/8 compared to standard, which is 1. So it's still a lot of savings. A lot of public clients with very high bathroom usage, I'm not gonna be able to convince to do waterless urinals, and then we'll be out of the system. So I'm just, if we could have like an extra point or something, or an extra something rather, if you do the waterless, I don't want to remove that listed, but I think that the mandatory should be 0.125, and an option, if it's possible to make an option, should be the waterless. That's my recommendation.
Okay, so Daniel, hopefully that answers your question. Renee, I don't know if you had anything else further to add, but I did see your hand up. Okay, good. We'll move forward then. Kristen.
So one thing to note is we are going to be hearing a drought resiliency proposal later on today. that has to do with waterless toilets. So if we wanted to say piggyback on that and put waterless urinals in there, if they don't, want to go through with this proposal, I think that might be a decent option.
Great, thanks for that input on that. We have a few more hands up, and I know Cheryl might be wanting to try to call, once she called back in, might want to talk, but I do want to remind you that start thinking about what motion you want to make on this as we hear the next 2 or 3 comments here. Next hand up is Austin.
Yeah, this is just to respond to Daniel. I agree with what Renee said. The 0.125 gallon flush is pretty much the lowest you can go that's marketably ready. I think EPA WaterSense has one that is 0.1, only one. And then when you get up to 0.125, there are many options that are WaterSense labeled. So that would be my recommendation is urinal pretty much stay how it is if we don't go to, if we stay away from non-water, it stays as 0.125 gallons.
Okay, I don't see any more hands up. I'll go to Cheryl, let's see if she's back on. Doesn't look like she made it back on yet, but since no more hands are up, I'll reiterate, this is your time to make a motion. Adam, go ahead.
All right, I make a motion to amend the proposal as is to put back in the 0.125 maximum on the urinals. So unstrike everything that was struck. And then to change D, public lavatory faucets, to 0.35. And then to put back the 1.1 gallon per flush toilet, because I know that even now people are still having issues with 1.1. People are having issues committing to 1.1. They're still afraid of them. So I think that would be a real benefit if we can get people to even go down that low.
Okay, bear with me. I don't know if I can do this without it coming back stricken in here.
Okay.
But just note, I'll work on that, but it is in there now in purple, which indicates a change. I'll work on that while I get some of these other hands up there. So there is a motion to make 3 changes. Just to reiterate, underwater closets, we're going to change it from to 1.10. Under B, urinals, we're going to include the sentence back in there. And under D, we are going to change it to 0.35 gallons per minute. Next hand up is Renee.
I agree with those changes. I don't know enough about the difference between the 0.25 and the 0.35 in terms of availability and cost. Wouldn't mind seeing the 100% on the drinking fountain thing, but if I can't change his proposal, then I'm fine with it as it is.
You can, Renee.
Oh, okay. Well, then I want to know more about the 0.25 versus 0.35, Adam. I do agree with you about the 1.1 because we've had those conversations as well. And the 0.125, I would like to see 100% on the drinking fountains. Does anybody have any comments on the 0.25 versus 0.35 availability and cost? I just haven't seen 0.25 either, so just would be curious.
So we will, it looks like Kristen might have an answer to that. Daniel will come back to you just because it's our subject matter expert. I think she can weigh in on it. Go ahead, Kristen.
I haven't seen too many 0.25s either. I think most of what's available right now is 0.35. But I have seen them. I just haven't seen that many of the 0.25s.
Okay, next hand up is Daniel. Well, sorry, Renee, let me see if you were finished with your thoughts there.
Sorry, I forgot to turn it to lower the hand.
Okay, good. Daniel?
Well, first to complete what Renee brought up, if Adam's okay with it, we could look at the drinking fountain water bottle language. I don't see it currently up. If we could change, if Adam's okay, we would change that to not less than one water filling station at each drinking fountain location, is what I understood Renee is looking for.
Yeah, that's perfect, Daniel. I think that's in line with what Renee said. Thanks.
Did I capture that correctly?
If you could change fountain to drinking fountain location. And also, if it's okay, one more thing, if it's okay with Adam, not necessarily as language here, but just to, like you said, have an understanding that it's up to Denver whether, it's up to CPD whether this becomes mandatory, or whether it's, just for points.
I don't think we need that, Daniel. I think that's pretty established at this point.
Okay, great. Can I second?
Yes, you may. All right.
Okay.
Okay, there's a motion with 4 changes on this. We've discussed those and you see those on the screen. And there is a second. Is there any discussion or any other further comments? Jonathan?
Just to modify that bottle filling language that you just did, I think it should say water bottle filling stations shall be an integral part of or shall be installed adjacent to all drinking fountain locations. Because now it's saying not less than 1 per drinking fountain. So I think that way you'd be allowed to just do 1 bottle filling station at a double.
It's getting better. Thanks, Jonathan.
I'm seeing some head nods. Okay, so Adam's good. Daniel, since a second, I see your head nodding good. Okay. Any other discussion? Cheryl, you're up.
Looks like her comments are in the chat.
Yep. So it says she'll stay brief. The unamended flow rates are already aggressive for commercially available large-scale projects. I believe we should leave this amendment as is for another 3 years, then revisit. So that is Cheryl's comments. Any other discussion? Thank you, Cheryl. Any other discussion? We do have a motion and a second. Austin, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that what we see in front of us, we've captured all the changes that we want. We were talking only the flushometer valves moving back to 1.1, but we're leaving tank type toilets at 0.8 gallons per flush.
Adam and I work mostly in commercial, so I think, so I don't know about the residential stuff.
I think those are fine. Did you want to amend, Austin? Did you want to amend the tank types?
No, I like it where it's at. Just wanted to make sure that was staying, just so I know for when I vote.
Okay. Yeah, it hasn't been changed.
Okay. I will go to our note taker to make sure we know how many voting members we have and to do a roll call in case we're missing anybody. Kara, go ahead.
My count is that we have 19 voting members. Wait, am I saying that right, Kristen? No, we have 4.
No, we have 18 voting members and we have 13 present.
Okay, so we have 13 voting members on the call. Thank you. And I see a hand up. Keith, go ahead.
Just a question, should that second 1.0 under A be changed back to 1.1?
I was just looking at that, Keith. I'm actually not sure because that's for dual flush and I guess you would average the dual flush, low flush and high flush. And I'm not aware of what's on the market that gets you to the difference between 1.1 and 1.0 with dual flush. So maybe if there's someone else that knows that.
Sure. Subject matter expert, maybe Kristen or anybody else have a comment on that. Jeff, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of on the flush valve. I think you should move it to 1.1 and make it consistent. Just I don't think you're going to find a lot of ones that have the flush up and flush down that are going to be at 1.0. I think you're going to find 1.1 being more common as the combination. And they're pretty rare, so I don't think you're getting much with that.
Well, and it's also a maximum. So if you err towards the 1.1, I think we'll be better off. So Kevin, if we can change that second one to 1.1, I think that would be, like Jeff said, it would be more consistent.
And trying to find Daniel to make sure you're okay with that since that was your second. Good, okay.
Then gallons
Kara,
in
go
there
ahead.
twice there.
Kara, your hand's up. Do you have something to add?
We actually have 14 voting members. We just had someone join recently, so not 13, 14.
Great, even better. All right, I think we have it all. I'll ask one final time, any further discussion? We are going to vote on these 4 items. So actually 5, I believe. In A, we've changed it to 1.10 gallons per flush, along with the dual flush. In C, we've added this paragraph back in, even though it's struck on my screen. We will fix that. In D, we've changed it to 0.35 gallons per minute. And then in J, we've updated the verbiage on there. So we are voting on just those amendments. Then we will vote on the proposal separately. So all those in favor of those amendments, please raise your hand. I see 12. Go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed, please raise your hand. C1, go ahead and lower your hands. And all those abstaining, please raise your hand. 0. Okay, so that passes. Now, I will call a vote. Well, I guess we need a motion to approve as amended now, if someone wants to do that. Courtney?
Motion to approve as amended.
Okay, anybody want a second? Austin?
I will second to approve as amended.
Okay, I'll call a vote. All those in favor of approving as amended, please raise your hand. C10, go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed, please raise your hand. C2, go ahead and lower your hands. And all those abstaining. C1. Okay, go ahead and lower your hands. So this passes as amended. Thank you for all the comments on that. I'll hit save so we have those on their next item is 34.10, and this is Colin, Colin, please introduce yourself. I've allowed you to speak, and I will bring up your proposal.
Yes, hi, everybody. Thank you for hearing our proposal. My name is Colin Bell. I am with the City and County of Denver in the Office of Green Infrastructure, which is in DOTI, Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. And so
thank you.
There are two codes here that we have to present. The first is related to stormwater management. I think maybe we're looking at a slightly older version of the document, but the changes aren't that different, just more the presentation. So anyway, there are two major sections to change as proposed. The first is related to the landscape design section, and the proposal was to add a plant list to the list of plant lists. The thought being that stormwater control measures are often vegetated and they're part of the landscape on small sites. And so the proposed plant lists in our stormwater control measure design guidelines should be included. So we have adding the ultra urban green infrastructure guidelines plant list, as well as our green continuum of streets plant lists to be available for vegetating. And so that's proposal A. Proposal B is a bit more major of a change. The original green code, you can scroll back up just a little bit because the strikes are important as well. So the original proposal was just for including stormwater management systems on greenfield development projects. And so the first key part is striking greenfields to allow for these stormwater control systems to be required on all development projects, as infill development is important in Denver. A and B are stricken mostly because the technical criteria specified isn't really what DOTI or the engineers in practice are used to seeing in stormwater codes. It's sort of a different language than what we're used to speaking. There's also some language around retaining water on site, and that can be complicated with water rights in Colorado. So I don't know if this was brought over from a different state potentially. And so striking the old criteria and introducing new criteria below in bold, which the essence of the essence of part A is that we propose shifting existing criteria, but based on site. So currently, depending on how much area is disturbed during development or redevelopment, it triggers different stormwater control levels. And what we see today with our current rules and regs are sites under a half acre don't have any stormwater control requirements. Sites a half acre to 1 acre have detention requirements only, and sites over 1 acre have both water quality and detention requirements. And so the proposal is kind of to shift all of those down. So now sites under a half acre would require, you have to meet the detention requirements, excuse me. Sites between a half acre and 1 acre would have detention and water quality requirements. And then for the sites over 1 acre, there's a new requirement in that all the runoff from rainfall events up to 0.3 of an inch has to be infiltrated or evaporated. So that's A. If you could scroll down to B, please. B stipulates some non-structural controls. So all of what I was talking about with detention and water quality requirements are structural controls. Also, this would require non-structural controls, such as including one pet waste station for every 30 residential units. The second part is being sure that if there's a designated pet waste area or a dog run, to make sure that the stormwater runoff from that area specifically is treated for water quality. And then the final is buildings with parking over 50 spaces include a program for street sweeping.
Okay, thanks, Callan, for that. I'm going to put you back on mute just for a minute. I do have an updated version I'll bring up on the screen. Before we, okay, I see that hand went down, but we will go to the general public. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support of this proposal, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support of this, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody that wants to speak support, please raise your hand. Being none, we will go to opposition. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public wants to speak in opposition. Third and final call, anybody who wants to speak in opposition? Seeing none, we will go back to the committee. Committee, this is your time to ask questions of the proponent. Questions and questions only. Are there any questions for the proponent? Adam, your hand is up first.
Colin, you might have mentioned this, but can you just briefly touch on how this is different from existing code and regulations? Uh-oh, did you hear me?
Yes. It's different. The design requirements are similar, but it's more the types of projects that have to meet them changes. So basically different project sizes that disturb different footprints have different regulations currently. And so we're sort of shifting the requirements around within those different disturbance classifications. So currently projects over 1 acre have a detention and water quality requirement. This would propose those existing and infiltrating or evapotranspiring, a 3/10 inch rain event. And then for 1/2 acre to 1 acre, currently it's detention only. This would propose detention and water quality. So it's current regulations just shifted to different projects sizes.
Got it. Thank you.
Next question comes from Daniel.
Sorry, thanks. Can you, B, item C, can you explain the relationship between parking spaces in a building and street sweeping? Or what the intent of that section is?
Yeah, maybe it's misspecified, but the request is street sweeping is, I guess, what the practice is known as, but street sweeping of the parking spaces. So if there's ample parking, that those parking lots must be swept.
Okay, and does this include parking spaces in a covered garage?
That's a good question. I think it does, yes, but it's not specified there.
Okay, I think if it says parking spaces in general, then that would be included, although the language street sweeping was certainly threw me off. Thank you.
All right, next question comes from Jeff.
Yeah, Colin, can you tell me, this might be my own ignorance, is there a specific design criteria for pet waste stations? And my second question is, what is it you're looking for a program for biennial street sweeping? Is that, I'm struggling with how that's in the building code or how we enforce that.
Yeah, so both of those, I don't know of a pet waste design criteria. I know that you can purchase pet waste stations and the facilities can operate them. So there isn't a design criteria around that. And similarly for the street sweeping, we were hoping that the developer would come up with a plan for that as well. So we don't have criteria around those two.
Thank you.
All right, next question comes from Jonathan.
Yeah, my question is also about the pet waste stations, the 1 per 30 units. I guess it doesn't really make sense to me why we'd need so many. I mean, if you had, say, a building with 300 units, there's going to be 10 pet waste stations. I don't even know where you put them. So it seems like maybe you're just needing like a bigger garbage can at the location where the pet waste station is. I mean, people, I'm assuming, are generally going to one of, you know, a limited number of places. I mean, especially at a zero lot line building. I mean, just the whole front of the building would be pet waste stations. So I feel like that needs to be modified somehow.
Callan, do you want to comment on the intent of that 1 per 30 units?
Yeah, I'd have to ask the MS4 team where the number came from, but I know that that was adopted from a requirement somewhere else, but I think that the concerns are valid.
Okay, thanks. The next hand is Cheryl. Cheryl, do you want to try and talk, or do you want to type in your question? Looks like she might have typed it in here. Okay, I'll read it out loud. Is it physically possible to provide stormwater detention in sites less than 0.5 acres? I'm concerned that for infill projects, this will require large underground excavations on sites with potentially underground hazards to the past history of building on the site.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, technically feasible. Underground detention is an option for, you know, highly developed sites. There is also potential to do green on the ground or to use green roofs. So definitely technically possible.
Okay, and Cheryl, if you had anything followed up, please type it in. We'll move to the next one. Courtney?
Hi, thank you. So I do agree that 1 per 30 units is a lot. Maybe there could be a maximum associated with that. So not more than, I don't know, 5 or something like that. I wouldn't want to make it just a garbage can. I believe that people may not always be responsible for their dogs, and having those bags there might prevent what we're trying to prevent. So I would want to make sure it's still like a pet station and not just a larger garbage area. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that between Jeff and Jonathan and that comment, maybe there is a volume, you know, there's a size of the, you know, the receptacle that could be targeted based on the number of units, but we definitely, yeah, don't always want a trash can if it's.
All right, next question comes from Adam.
I think adding on to that, Courtney, we could just define what a wet pet waste station is. And I think that'll solve the issue. Thanks.
Okay, seeing that there are no more questions and we had nobody speak up in support or opposition, we will now move to the discussion portion. This is the portion where the committee, you can have further discussion or make a motion. Daniel.
Did you say you were going to pull up our current version of landscape design 601311, or did I miss here? Because I know we may have passed something on that, and I just want to understand how item 4 that's being proposed here, that would be added to what was already amended and voted on. Is that correct? We wouldn't be rewriting the entire section as written here. It would just be the item 4 would be added to whatever our current 601311 looks like.
I don't have that readily available in front of me, that section, but maybe we can have someone else weigh in if we were just going to add item number 4 to that.
Do you have a record whether we already voted on and accepted an amendment to 601311?
Yeah, we're having Kristen and Kara look into that. I'll also look into that, but I don't have it right in front of me. I'll keep looking though.
Thank you.
In the meantime, we'll see if there's any other discussion or if anybody wants to make a motion. Okay, I don't see any hands up. Daniel?
I would like to make a recommendation to whoever's considering this from the committee that if there's an item such as that street sweeping that is ongoing maintenance, because this is a building code, that would be changed to, you know, a plan being submitted for maintenance. I don't think we regulate the actual maintenance. I may be incorrect, but I believe we regulate the construction and maybe a plan that's submitted with, you know, the permit application, and that plan could include a maintenance plan.
Okay, so if anybody's wanting to make a motion, Daniel's recommending to potentially change that to include I believe this is what you're saying, and this highlighted one to include a plan on that.
Correct, a submittal of a plan. And maybe that's what that means, a program for, it doesn't require the street sweeping, so that's good. It's including a program. So I guess that would be a submittal at the time of the building permit that includes a maintenance plan or a program.
Okay. And to go back to your last question, Daniel, I don't know if we were able to pull that up yet, but we did have a landscape design, which is P34.8, that passed with 3 modifications to that. I'm going to see maybe Kristen or Kara if you can't pull up that one to see if I don't know if we can do that quickly on the fly or not, but trying to answer your question, Daniel. But there was a landscape design proposal that I believe it was last hearing passed 10-0 to 1 with 3 modifications.
And as a point of clarification, is it correct that if we pass this item, then item 4 is the extent of this modification? So everything else under 601.311 would stay as previously modified, just that item 4 would be added. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's the intent.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Is anybody ready to make a motion? I would say, Daniel, see your hands up, but I think you're going to lower it here, unless you did want to make a motion. Okay, Courtney, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to amend based on what Daniel wanted for the street sweeping, maybe changing the word program to plan. Daniel, is that enough of a change to accommodate what you're thinking?
Yes,
Okay.
a maintenance plan would be ideal.
Maintenance plan. And I'd also like to address the pet waste station. I'm trying to think of how to address it exactly. I know we talked about defining pet waste station, but also I think the quantity is important as well. So maybe a maximum of 4. Like, I'm just thinking if it was a block, a building within a block, then you'd have 1 per corner. But Christy, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I was going to suggest we might want to think about like basing it. I don't know that we want to have it be a number so much as like looking at frontage and like is there a pet run up on an amenity deck? I feel like this is one we can sit here and do this in committee, or I might propose that we amend this with the intention of a small group just getting this defined, because I think I would do it based on frontage, because I'm just thinking of like 5-story multifamily residential that take up a whole block versus a 40-story tower that just has frontage in one spot. We've got to figure out what the right
Yeah.
ratio is, and I don't know on the fly.
Yeah, I agree with it. I think we can come up with a solution to that, but maybe not in the next 2 minutes. So that would be part of my motion to figure this portion out later.
Okay. Kara, sorry. You're on mute. If you want to unmute, there you go.
To Daniel's comment, we did discuss some landscape proposals that were in chapter 5, that were not in chapter 6 in the first hearing. So I think if there's some more detail about those that you want to come back to, we can, but I don't have any record of proposals that would affect these sections in chapter 6.
Great. Thanks for the feedback. That was very helpful. All right, there's a motion on the table to amend item C here to delete program, but make it a maintenance plan, and then a further intent to define item A with a pet waste station. Is there a second on that?
I would second.
Okay, great. Any further discussion before I call a vote? Seeing none, I will call a vote on those two items, those two amendments, and then we'll vote on the proposal in general. All those in favor of approving those two amendments, please raise your hand. The 11, go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed, please raise your hand. 0. All those abstaining. 1. Okay, so those amendments pass. So now is there a motion to approve as amended? Daniel?
Motion to approve as amended.
Okay, is there a second? Courtney?
Second.
Okay. Antonio, I see your hands up. Did you have anything to add?
No, I was just going to second.
Okay, thank you. All right, all those, I'll call a vote. All those in favor of approving as amended, please raise your hand. The 11, go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Seeing none, and all those abstaining, please raise your hand. 2. All right, thank you. Let me save this. Get over here. Reason my agenda disappeared. Next item of business, let me look at a time check. Actually, let's do a little break here because we're almost halfway through. Let's do a 8-minute break. I'll put a timer up on the screen. Feel free to turn off your camera, do what you need to do, and we'll be back in 8 minutes.
Hey, Kevin. I'll be out for the next hour, and then I'll be back for the last half hour.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, if you can hear my voice, let's start making our way back. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are to our next item of business. That's 34.11 as shown on the screen. Callan, this one is also yours. Do you mind giving us a brief summary of this one?
Yes, this proposal is sort of at the interface of stormwater and irrigation. And the previous, or the revised code mentions using alternative sources of water in irrigation as a way to reduce potable irrigation demand. And so the spirit of this is to formalize and define, the use of stormwater to offset irrigation demand. And so we do that first by adding a definition of runoff harvesting, which is the practice of routing stormwater runoff to landscape areas intentionally. And so first is just defining it and establishing it as a alternative source of water. And so that's 3A. And then 4A is just to exempt runoff harvesting from the source measurement requirement. Essentially, it is an alternative source of water, and we want it to be used for irrigation, but it's difficult to measure, and so this would exempt it from the source measurement.
Thank you. General public, if anybody wants to speak in support of this, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support of this proposal, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody that wants to speak in support of this, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll go to opposition. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition of this, please raise your hand. Anybody who wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we will go to the committee for questions. Anybody from the committee have any questions? No questions? Third time, anybody from committee have any questions? Being none, we'll move to the discussion portion. Anybody in the committee have any discussion or input they want to put out there or make a motion? The weather's too nice for anybody to talk. Christy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would make a motion to approve as written.
Great, thank you. Is there a second? Eric.
I'll second the motion. I do have a question for the proponent. I know a little late coming in, but with respect to the item on the table, alternate sources of water, I'm not clear that that in and of itself is a defined term. Runoff harvesting is defined, and I'm wondering if there are other alternate sources that could be unintentionally included in this, which are not intended to be used. Not knowing exactly what that might be, but I would just want to make sure that we're not including something under alternate sources that is not intended to be included.
Callan, we want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I believe, I can't quite remember, but I think alternate source of water was defined at the beginning of the code. And I don't know if Austin's hand's raised to weigh in on the second part of the question.
Yeah, I was jumping in to say, I think we tried to get it this way. Hopefully Jeff's on as well, so that we could include gray water under alternate sources plus other sources that we hadn't thought of the last time around. And this kind of shows that the runoff harvesting was one of those other thoughts that Jeff and I weren't familiar with last time. And under that, I think for a gray water system like a NSF 350 approved gray water system, that alternate source of water 500 gallons per day or greater is when you should be meeting water, where you're trying to capture some of this like out of storm gutters or other places and bring it onto site. It's just way too hard to measure any of those sources of water. So I think we might need to consider some sort of a further definition to this. But it's, yeah, just a little bit of nuance that I'm not quite sure how to word.
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I think to Eric's point there, or in the question that you're asking is like, what are all the sources that could be really difficult to measure as they come onto a site, or on-site sources? Runoff being one of those, but you could also look at like air conditioning, condensate is one that you really can't, we know there's a lot of water there, but depending on the building size, but it's hard to measure. Dewatering is another one that's hard to measure, that's out there. But I would say that, rainwater runoff is the largest of those, and it's probably the one that has the most challenges as far as management of it, and trying to get that is probably the heart of what Colin's getting at with this. Let me know if that helps.
All right, next. Eric, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, generally that's speaking to my question in terms of just alternate sources seems to be very general, and so I don't think providing a laundry list of all the different alternative sources is valuable in code, because we're bound to miss something. I just want to make sure that the opposite isn't occurring either, that there is some alternate source that we actually would not want to recognize or be included. And there certainly may not be, and that's fine. Again, just kind of looking for what's not there.
Okay, thank you. Next hand up is Renee.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, who's paying for this? Is it Denver Water? If it's in Denver Water's utility district, is it the customer who's putting sub-meters on? Is it building specific, or is it just at the site and you only care if there's multiple buildings, you only care if it's like over 1,000 gallons per day or so? Are we trying to get building level water metering here? Because I'm not seeing it, if that's the intent.
Callan, do you want to weigh in on your intent?
My intent was to fit runoff harvesting into the existing code. I don't know if Jeff or Austin can speak to the spirit of, table 60134-1A previously.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. And that was to start requiring more metering for specific use types. So if like landscape use was using some amount of potable water, we wanted to see a sub-meter put on there. And I'm not sure exactly where if this is the only place that this table lives within the green code, but there are other ordinances on the books already that if the if like multifamily dwelling is on a individual per unit being system, it would be required to have its own water meter. But we have a huge exemption that anything that's on a shared water source, so any boiler system or anything like that, which 99% of existing large multifamily, they'd have to have multiple water meters. So I think this was designed originally to get more granular data on where water is being used on sites in hopes that people start measuring with a closer look to water efficiency. But we also don't want to make it so over the top that when you're trying to come up with alternate water sources, we're only measuring the ones that make sense. And right now I would say it might make sense to add gray water, NSF 350 approved gray water systems in addition, and then keep alternate sources maybe out of this so that we're not running into this issue with rainwater harvesting or stormwater harvesting.
Okay, Renee, does that answer your question?
I'm hoping Jeff has got his hands up to answer a little bit more of the who owns the meter and is paying for it.
Yeah, I think to your
Go
point
ahead,
of who owns the meter, I believe that in this it's saying that if it's potable water, you know, it's probably, there would be a chance it's Denver Water for part of that, but if it's irrigation, it is not a requirement for all sites that it's them. It would probably be on site at the irrigation is required, so it would be the building owner. Municipal reclaimed water, that would be, I think that would be Denver Water's. It's metered already, but alternate sources, I believe this is about exempting that from it. So there is no metering process for it. There's no measuring for rainwater harvesting is really what they're getting to. So the idea of passing this to say, don't require people to measure what they can't measure, because it's not, you can't put a meter on it and really do a good job of it. Does that help, Renee?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, there's a motion to approve as written and a second. Is there any further discussion? Being none, Kara, go ahead.
I just have a quick question. We have an extra person, Sarah Anderson, in the room, and I wondered if she was representing Dottie or if she might be representing a committee member today.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, why don't you go ahead and unmute?
Yes, Dottie, not a committee member.
Thank you. All right, I'll call a vote. All those in favor of passing this, please raise your hand. The 11, go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed, please raise your hand. 0, and all those abstaining, please raise your hand. 1. Okay, go ahead and lower them. All right, so this passes. That brings us up to our next item of business, which is item number 139. And Kristen, I believe that's yours. Why don't you go ahead and give us a rundown on that while I pull it up.
Okay, sorry, I'm moving from minutes to talking about this. Okay, so this is the drought resiliency proposal. And really when we went into this, we had thought about all of the ways that we could extend the code, right, to look at resiliency strategies around water use that already hadn't been addressed in other proposals. And it was a little challenging. So we've got a few options here. We thought that 2 out of the 3 sections might be applicable. So the first section is irrigation sprinkler efficiency, looking at all the spray sprinkler bodies would have internal pressure regulators and be water sense labeled. So although we've got irrigation requirements spread out through multiple proposals, this one is an addition and would make sure that those sprinklers that are installed have regulators and can additionally reduce the amount of water used for sprinklers. The second component is waterless toilets. We looked at commercially manufactured waterless toilets to be used in private restrooms, as well as 20% of public restrooms. So there are some requirements here in terms of capacity, treatment systems. We basically followed the NSF requirements for, I think, NSF 41. So those have kind of been tested, probably not as much as we had hoped, but those are really what's commercially available. And the last one is just addressing any high water end uses, including swimming pools. We talked about types of pool covers that would be used and regularly, trying to prevent evaporation. We eliminated we said chemical pool covers did not comply, as well as we included here something about commercial kitchens and the spray rinse valves, as well as dipper wells to be either reduced or eliminated from designs. So although this is kind of a smattering of a bunch of different things, we really were trying to get at every little kind of ounce of water efficiency that we could that weren't already addressed in other proposals or in DGC already.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the general public. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support of this, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support? Seeing none, I'll go to opposition. Anybody that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public wants to speak in opposition of this proposal, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody that wants to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll go to the committee. Committee, it's your time to ask questions. Are there any questions for the proponent? Eric, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. With respect to compliance, if compliance is required in accordance with 2 of the 3 sections, and those sections in 60139 are indicated as 601-391, 601-392, and 601-393. The high water end uses is only going to apply to a small fraction of those developments, which forces compliance into only 601-391 and 601-392. And to me, that seems a bit restrictive, really. And so I'm just curious, the thought on that, and if that really is the intent, because probably the majority don't have pools and or commercial kitchens, so they would have to comply with 391 or 392. I'd just like to hear a little bit of feedback on that.
Yeah, sure. And I'm definitely open to adjusting things. We just didn't want everyone to go and do the sprinkler efficiency. I think that one's obviously the easiest one. So in that respect, we wanted to make sure that they were considering something else. Obviously, waterless toilets is probably the largest one here. So I'm open to restructuring so that we get the intent that is intended.
Next question comes from Jeff.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the sprinkler efficiency, the spray bodies. How is that different from the state standards that were passed last year?
That is a great question. I don't exactly know what those state standards are, but I do think that they're below this internal pressure regulator.
Okay,
If
yeah.
you
'cause
can
it-
forward that
it-
to me, I would love to take a look.
Okay, I'll put something in the chat, but I think it's the state has actually already said that you can only sell uh, sprinkler spray bodies that are water sense labeled and that have an internal check valve. So I think, I mean, it's fine to be redundant in some ways, but you know, because state law could change. But I just want to make sure that we're consistent with those languages.
No, that's good to know. I know that some of the regulations have sell-through. And so I'm not sure, you know, whether the state requirement says, you know, you have to provide these. If they have sell-through, it could be several years before that's actually put into place. So this could be something where people proactively or teams proactively go looking for these instead of buying whatever's on the shelf.
Okay, I'll put something in the chat. I think that'll clarify that. And the other one is swimming pools. I having run a program that looked at requiring swimming pool covers. One of the areas that you know, property managers and others really had an issue with safety. How do we ensure that pool covers are safe for children and that we're not, you know, no one should die for water efficiency is kind of a threshold, I guess.
Yep, totally agree. It's a great point. I'm not sure how to handle that here.
Okay.
I can speak to this, is Eric, with the
Go
city.
ahead.
There are separate regulations that are specifically intended to address the pool, either fencing or covers that have to meet a particular ASTM standard for safety. And so that would be addressed, but just in a different regulation.
Okay.
Eric, would those interfere with some type of like pool cover for evaporation purposes? Usually the ones I've seen are like nets that would be over. So I think you could probably do both.
Yeah, the ones that are designed and listed according to the ASTM standard for safety will have met those specific testing criteria so that, you know, a kid or an animal or something doesn't end up in and, you know, get stuck and drown. So I think that they would actually be complementary in that these covers in preventing you know, an unintended occupant would also prevent you know, evaporation, that sort of thing.
All right, next question comes from Austin.
I was curious if there's any willingness to, on the sprinkler side, go even a step further and kind of go to the high efficiency nozzles that sit on the sprinkler bodies themselves. The sprinkler bodies are a great starting point that kind of saves some of that water once a irrigation cycle is done, and it makes it so water doesn't drain out of the lowest point just by gravity. But the other side of it is the spray coming out of the head of the nozzle also needs to be efficient. And unfortunately, EPA WaterSense doesn't regulate or have a WaterSense label for that portion of it. So you can have a sprinkler body that still is inefficiently putting out a lot of water. So Denver Water rebates for, I think, 5 or 6 different high efficiency nozzles, and I'm just curious, would you guys be willing to include those nozzles as a subsection to this?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'll let the DGC also comment.
Okay, next up is Cheryl. Cheryl, if you want to type your question or try to speak, typed it. I'll read it. Are any waterless toilets currently in use in Denver? Are there any additional regulatory or code measures that would have to be put in place for the use of waterless toilets? For example, would the IPC have to be modified? Would a permit for waste removal have to be acquired? don't know if anybody can answer that on the committee.
I'll speak on the city's behalf at the moment in that those are very good questions, and I'm not familiar enough with the IPC or our, perhaps SEDP or solid waste, hazardous waste teams to know the answer, but definitely relevant. Let me see what I can find out in the next few minutes here.
There are some installed in Denver. For example, the city and county building, I believe they're still there, but they did have some installed in our building on the second floor for the permitting department there. The IPC does have some or very little. I'm not sure if it even has anything for the waterless urinal since there's no water connection. There is the waste connection, but I don't believe that it would need to be modified for that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing no questions, we will go to the discussion portion of this, or if anybody wants to make a motion. Any further discussion on this? Kristen?
I just had a question about what Keith just said. Are you talking about waterless urinals or waterless toilets? Because we're talking about toilets.
Oh, I was talking about waterless urinals. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
I'm not aware of any waterless toilets in Denver.
Okay, Cheryl, you're up next. And she wrote it in the chat. I'll read it out loud. If a project doesn't have any sprinklers, are they required to comply with the two other measures, or do they automatically get credit for not having sprinklers?
So I can answer that one. In general, this kind of goes across the Denver Green Code. They would not get credit for something that doesn't apply to their project, so it would drive them to the other options.
Thank you. Next hand is Keith.
One thing that I would want to bring up to consider within the group is if we do have the waterless toilets and or the waterless urinals, do we want to have a requirement to have water piping there so that they can be changed out in the future, or how do we want to handle that situation? I know we used to have, and although I can't find it anywhere, I thought we used to have a requirement for waterless urinals that required the water piping to be there just in case. That way it wouldn't have to be tore up, the walls wouldn't have to be tore up in the future if they switched it out.
Yeah, Keith, that is actually in there. It says rough plumbing for optional future conventional water flushing fixtures shall be installed per IPC. It's in, I think it's second to last sentence. There you go.
I see it. That was my mistake. I'm sorry.
Kristen, your hand's up still. I don't know if you had anything else to add.
I did. Thank you for the information about the law about sprinkler heads. It looks like there is no sell-through that is possible. So that is a law in Colorado. So I'm not sure if we want to replace that with, I think it was Austin's suggestion for the nozzle, or if we want to address that some other way, or take it out altogether.
Thank you. Committee, keep that in mind. Next hand up is Courtney.
Yeah, I was gonna say what Kristen just said about replacing that with a nozzle. I'm also going back to Eric's point of how is this structured? I'm struggling a little bit in terms of like how many points or how many credits are required out of this. I'm glad. I think we should be able to at least build on top of an existing law rather than duplicating it for sprinklers. I don't know. Do we want to do 2 out of 3, or is 1 out of 3 more appropriate? I'm just trying to figure out the best balance for these projects, and I welcome feedback. Or Kristen, if you have a suggestion on how to reformat that, I'd really welcome.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we put in waterless urinals in here since it didn't pass in the one that we just heard. So there's 4 options. And then maybe we can adjust how many we would like them to go after. I think we struggle sometimes on how to make this fair, right? If there's a bunch of different options, how do we make it fair and not just give credit for the super easy things, and no one goes for the more challenging stuff.
Yeah, I do like the adding an additional credit for the additional option for waterless urinals, since that did not make it in the other one. I mean, ideally, people just don't have pools, and then we address a lot of the water issues. So I don't want to like incentivize people having pools just to avoid having a waterless toilet or something like that. So I guess I would make a motion to, can I do that, Kevin? Okay, I would make a motion to adjust the sprinkler efficiency to accommodate the nozzles that Austin was mentioning. And welcome his input on that language.
Okay, Austin, is there
Yeah,
a list or something that we could put in there?
Yeah, there's a water list. Unfortunately, my internet is not helping and I can't paste anything in chat right now. But yeah, Denver, if you just Google Denver water nozzle rebate, you'll get to the list of 5 or so that we rebate for, and those are the ones that should be included for now.
Okay, for the time being, until we can get that pulled up, is this what, did I capture what you're trying to say, Courtney, on the screen?
Yeah, that captures the intent. I would also want to add in the waterless urinal option from language from our previous proposal.
Okay, so that, let me see, 601.3.9.4 waterless here. And I will have to put that language in there. But for the time being, again, just for time's sake, we will highlight that on there. Okay, so those are your motion is to add those 2 highlighted yellow things. Next, anything else, Courtney? Okay, next hand is Jeff.
Yeah, I think on the sprinkler types, I think instead of just a list of products that are acceptable, we probably need to have criteria in there, because we'd want more manufacturers getting in over time. I mean, should shift the market. So, I mean, I think we can probably come up with some language on that, but it really is, it's going to be high efficiency heads that have low precip rates, matched precip rates. There's a few different items. I can throw them in the chat for you so it's easy to copy over, but I think that'll give us at least a starting point, but I think Austin and I could come up with that. What is that criteria that would satisfy it? But I wouldn't want to just list just a few manufacturers.
I agree wholeheartedly with that, Jeff. Yeah, if we can just get more language, that'd be great.
Okay, and we can always have a subcommittee together to finish that out, so we don't have to do it here while we're meeting. But at least the intent's on there. Okay, there's a motion. Keith, your hand's up.
The only thing I wanted to ask is, if we're adding the waterless urinals down there, do we need to change at the top where it says 2 of the 3? Does that need to be changed to 2 of the 4 or 3 of the 4?
Yes, we would need to put that number in there. I'll do that, but also that needs to be discussed with the committee on how they want to handle that. Do they want to do 2 of the 4 still, or do they want to do more?
Yeah, that's why I brought it up.
Thank you. Anybody else? Courtney, go ahead.
My response to that would be 2 out of the 4 still. I think giving more options is, or more flexibility, especially if you don't have a pool, it's helpful.
Okay, Eric, go ahead.
I'd like to second those changes and including the 2 out of 4 option.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, so we will vote on those changes and those changes only. So let me highlight the, oops, a little bit tricky here. Let me highlight those on the screen. We're adding 2 of the 4 of the options. We added a 4th option, the waterless urinal from the previous proposal, which everybody had the language for, so I won't put that in there for the time being. And then also the intent to add metrics from the Denver Waterless on this sprinkler efficiency. So that is what we're voting on. All those in favor of those amendments, please raise your hand. I see 10, go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed? 0, and all those abstaining? 1. Okay, go ahead and lower your hands. Okay, so those amendments are in there. Does anybody want to make a motion? Eric?
I move to approve as amended.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Austin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll second.
Christy, okay?
Sorry.
No
All right.
problem.
We have a
Second
second
as
and a
amended.
third. Okay. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. The 11, go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed? Seeing none, on all those abstaining. I have 1. Okay, go ahead and lower your hands. Now I do want to ask for the further intent to modify this list of sprinkler efficiencies. All those who want to be a part of that, please raise your hand so our note taker can make note of that. Keith, I see. Well, Keith's hand went down, so maybe not. Austin, anybody else want to be a part of that? Jeff? Okay, all right, go ahead and lower your hands. And that brings us to the next item of business, which is 112B. Kristen, I believe this one's yours again. Why don't you give us a summary while I pull it up?
Okay, so we, in a previous code hearing, we heard 112A, which was the dwelling unit deconstruction proposal. And so this is kind of the second component of that, really focusing on designing for that deconstruction. So in the future, the deconstruction process won't be as challenging. So this really paves that way to support that that future aspect of deconstruction, 50 to 100 years down the road. It also supports the salvage market to close a loop on that closed loop industry. Some of these requirements are already technically required, but may not be checked past, certificate of occupancy. And so this will also just kind of lead to transparency in terms of what materials are there. So as you have multiple tenants coming in and renovating tenant improvement projects, you'll know what materials you might want to use to have the same look and feel as if you were meeting the existing. So I think this credit is really about intentionality in the design rather than increasing the cost and making things more transparent. So we have, again, being able to comply with 3 out of the 4 sections below. The sections are building records, building materials disclosure, design for durability, adaptability, and disassembly, and then procurement of salvage materials. I think we, you know, as we were developing this proposal, we really took a look at a lot of different certifications that take a look at this. We did try and talk to the folks at the city of Portland to figure out how we could close the loop a little bit better. And this is kind of what we have kind of come up with. So open to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you. Before we move to general public, looks like we might have a question already. Renee?
Oh, I'll wait till it's comment time for us. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody wants to speak in support? Seeing none, I'll go to opposition. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition? Third and final call, anybody that wants to speak in opposition? Seeing none, committee, I'll turn it back to you for questions. Eric, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a question with respect to 90165, procurement of salvaged materials. It's not clear to me how using salvaged materials contributes to deconstruction. I'm trying to understand the correlation there a little bit better. Can you help me maybe understand that?
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, in the previous proposal, we had talked about, you know, the deconstruction of a building, right? Well, if you to supplement the deconstruction of a building, you want to sell off those materials that have value, right, in the salvage market. And so if there's nothing on the flip side of folks trying to get salvage materials into a new building, you know, that demand for salvage materials is not there. So to kind of offset the cost and how to balance things out for maybe additional cost and deconstruction by hand, you'd want to have a market for those salvage materials. So we were just trying to include salvage materials in here, and a lot of them can be, you know, salvage wood for wall paneling, salvaged doors, things like that. So they don't necessarily need to be, they wouldn't be structural, they would be a finished material. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Next question comes from Renee.
In the lead world, which I live in a lot, we've never been able to get this credit because of the threshold. Unfortunately, we would love to. Lots of projects where they're disassembling buildings maybe could, but I think the threshold is going to be hard. So I'm wondering if, you know, we could add either reduce the threshold or consider adding reuse, the value of reused buildings. If the intent of this credit or this option is to reduce embodied carbon, do we have a proposal on reducing embodied carbon as an option where you calculate that and you say, well, let's reduce 10% embodied carbon, whether that's salvage materials or building reuse, it doesn't matter. Or maybe we use some extra fly ash in the concrete to get there.
Yeah, I think there is an embodied carbon proposal by MBI, and City and County of Denver, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think that is coming up maybe next.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one around concrete and one around steel.
Oh, good.
So I think that is addressed, but I agree with you. 5% is fairly aggressive. I think I think there has to be some type of incentive to do that, right? I think a lot of projects teams see it as this thing that can't be achievable. So I'm definitely open to reducing that, as well as, you know, potentially putting in something in here for reusing an entire building.
Okay, next question comes, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, the other thing I guess is, you know, the title of this proposal is designing for deconstruction. So I guess using an existing building would fit into that.
The next question comes from Cheryl. She usually types this in given her situation, so I'll read it. In regard to 9.6.4, how exactly will compliance be judged or qualified? Who decides what does or doesn't qualify as a prefabricated element? what is the definition of standardized fastening systems? These are just two examples, but I see ambiguity. I can't, it's getting late. Within the majority of the criteria, A through H, how do we provide more clarity to the requirement?
Yeah, that's a great question. In developing these, it's really hard to define everything, right? And I think part of that is on the design team to figure out what makes sense for the project. And in terms of enforcement, I think it would be a list of items. I think certain things can be in multiple categories potentially. Standardized fastening systems is just, I think it's probably fairly common with commercial construction, but just, not changing the fastening system. So if you're using a certain, structural component for, floors and walls, right, connecting them, making sure that you don't switch that, mid-building or things like that. So that if you had to replace them or take them apart, that it would be easier to do. You wouldn't have to get additional tools, or, you're not gluing things together where so other things are maybe bolted together. So I don't know if that answers her question or not. I think that there is some ambiguity and we'd have to work through that with the city.
Okay, Cheryl, if you had anything to follow up, go ahead and type it in the chat, but we'll move to the next question. In the meantime, Scott, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, my questions, a couple of questions to that same section, 9.6.4. The first is just a clarification on the initial language. So it talks about provide one design element per 5,000 square feet of the building projects, or a minimum of 10, whichever is greater. I guess I'm struggling to see what the 10 is, a minimum of 10 what? So there's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. That's not 10. Maybe just clarify that.
Yeah.
Question
yeah,
one.
sorry. Maybe we should clarify that. 10 design elements. So say you have like some type of modular component and you have 10 of them, that you'd be done. If you have 10 cradle to cradle materials in the project, you're done. If you're just using the minimum.
Got it. Okay. Because I'm thinking of that in residential, right? A lot of the residential will fall under that 5,000 square foot. So it would be one, I guess, for that project.
Well, it'd be a minimum of 10. It'd be a minimum of 10, right? So
or a minimum of 10. Okay, if it's less than 5,000 square foot.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and then my second, I guess maybe it's more a discussion topic than a question, but I'll phrase it as a question, and it sort of piggybacks off the previous one in defining what these are. I guess my question is from the Portland model, were they able to show that some of these actually translated to easier disassembly? Particularly, I'm thinking of prefabricated. Prefabricated is advantageous for a lot of reasons, but once everything is assembled on site, a lot of times it's not that different than if it were built on site once it's all put together. And so I'm wondering if they had any data or any case studies that showed that, these items A through H actually translated to easier disassembly.
So just to clarify, so the city of Portland did not do 1 through 4. They were doing the deconstruction policy that we've already approved, but they made sure to let me know that it was important to address option number 5 for having salvage materials be in buildings. So that completed that loop. So I'm sorry if I misrepresented that. In terms of having data to support 4, I didn't come across any specific studies that show that. But from anecdotal conversations with Portland and other demo contractors, definitely easier, to pull apart things if they're not, glued together in terms of fabricated elements. That one, I think we were kind of more going for ease of construction, right? Not necessarily deconstruction. So the embodied energy and putting it together. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but some of these things I've heard anecdotally from folks do make a difference. And some of them are, I think, where we're trying to trend.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Being none, we'll go to the next portion. This is your opportunity to have further discussion or to make a motion. Scott, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, just a discussion point on maybe some of the unintended consequences of some of these things. The adhesive, I totally understand from a deconstruction point of view. I know from a energy efficiency, air sealing, building envelope point of view that adhesive and sealants are vital to that. And so I would caution to discourage using or not using sealants and adhesives just in that regard. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Jonathan.
I was wondering about with the building records, whether maybe we'd want to add providing a BIM model if the project was produced in BIM, which at this point most I would assume are. I think I could see that being useful going forward. So I guess I'd like to propose that we add that.
Okay, do you want to make an official motion or just leave that up to the committee to ponder?
I guess I can leave it up for people to ponder and then I can make a motion later.
Okay. All right. Next hand up is Renee.
I guess I would make a motion to add the words building reuse to that section about the salvaged material. Where is that? 9.6.5. Minimum 5% building materials or products installed or building materials or products installed or reused.
Did I capture that correctly?
Thank you.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table. Eric, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think maybe Cheryl had her hand up ahead of mine.
Oh, sorry. That is true. Sorry. I'll do Cheryl next, and then I'll come back to you, Eric.
And sorry, there was one more change there that we need to have, which is the name of it, procurement of salvaged or reused materials. Thank you.
Okay, did I capture it? All right, Cheryl, I go to the chat to follow up on Renee's point on the difficulty of achieving 9.6.5. I don't think that should be included in this proposal. Design for deconstruction is a good concept, but the salvage requirement may make it impossible to be achieved. That was her discussion. Eric, your hand's up next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jonathan had made a comment earlier regarding BIM model in terms of the design information. I'm curious, Jonathan, do you think that there would be any proprietary or copyright issues or concerns with that? I could definitely foresee design professionals not wanting to give away their BIM models.
Yeah, I feel like we've gotten less antsy about that stuff over the past couple of years. I mean, I'm sure that there are some firms that are, but at this point we sort of, I don't know, we give our BIM models out all the time, but I think as buildings get more connected, giving owners, and facility managers the ability to have it would be really helpful. I hear what you're saying, though, that I know that some firms are. I mean, I feel like there's a way to sort of strip stuff out of the model at that point that there's not a huge, well, I don't know. Maybe it's just that I've become much more laissez-faire about it, but I don't own an architecture firm myself, so the owners might feel different than I do.
Just curious, appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, it's a good point, though.
All right, next hand up is Scott.
Thanks. So kind of struggling with how to phrase this. So I understand, and I like that there's an option of 3 out of 4. I like the general big picture of this, and I think 2 of these are easily done and a good idea. It seems like the other 2, I guess I'd make a motion to take away 2 out of the 4, which is the salvage materials and the design for durability, until we can further define those or show further evidence that those in fact help the deconstruction. And so I'm okay with the first 2 because I think those are great. So I guess my motion is to remove those 2.
Just FYI.
Okay, there is a current mode.
5 sections, sorry. Just wanted to let you know.
Oh, 5. Okay.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
So
that's fine. So just a point of order, there is already a current motion on the table to amend the section that you want to delete, Scott. So unless Renee wants to take away her motion, we would have to vote on that first. And then
okay, then I will
motion to do that.
Thank you for that clarification. I would agree then with her motion to modify that, and I don't know that I heard what that modification would be, but that it would be modified. That's okay. I would be okay with that.
Okay, so her motion was to modify section 9.901.6.5, and if you could see the screen, it's adding those 2 yellow highlighted sections of that in the text. So are you saying you want to second that, or just keeping that out there for the committee to listen to? You're on mute, Scott. It's fine. You don't have to second. I'm just trying to clarify what you wanted to do.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. I would agree with that. I don't know that I want to second that. I guess I would, because I have another would want to strike or modify the 9.6.4 as well. So
okay, understood.
However you best. Okay, great. Thank you.
No worries. Next hand is Courtney.
Hi, thank you. I'm not trying to complicate this more. I do really appreciate the intent of this proposal for new buildings. I'm wondering if we can potentially add something where if you're reusing a whole building in itself, like you just get the credit for this to incentivize adaptive reuse on that side. I think for new building construction, I think all of this is great. I appreciate the conversation modifications proposed as well. But I feel like maybe there's a way to incentivize that adaptive reuse side. Thank you.
Okay, the committee can think about that. Next hand we have is Kristen.
I just wanted to ask a question about the BIM model, and if the quantities are in the BIM model, and if that would help with part 3 of this, 9.6.3 about building materials disclosure.
Let's see, Jonathan, I think originally that was your idea. You want to comment?
Yeah, I mean, you can do takeoffs, I mean, we typically don't do takeoffs off of a BIM model though, because it's a little bit unreliable at this point. I mean, it is all there. It's, you know, it's kind of how you model things. It certainly could be used. One of the things I was just looking at is whether we could sort of specify an ISC file, which is like an open standard that's used between different software platforms, so that it was, we were specifying that people needed to provide something that, you know, would be useful in the future. Who knows what software we'll be using in 10 years. But yeah, relying on a BIM model for material takeoffs is a little bit dangerous right now.
All right, next hand up is Adam.
I just have one really minor thing to add, and I'm not sure, I'd love some input if anyone has an opinion, but the cradle to cradle certified materials, I always get nervous just having one specific certification listed there. I think I would like to add to Renee's change and just add or equivalent to the end of that. And I'm not really sure what that means, but there could be other certifications that come out in the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years that have the same intent of cradle to cradle that could be used. And I don't want to have this I don't want to have people just beholden to one third-party certification.
Okay, Renee, are you okay with putting that into your motion by adding or equivalent?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so there is a motion on the table. Is there a second? Motion is to just add a few words. For now, we'll vote on that separately if there is a second, and then there will be opportunity to make other motions.
I'll second it.
Okay, there is a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call a vote then, and we're only voting on these items highlighted in yellow. So in category G, we're adding or equivalent, and in 901.6.5, we're adding the term or reused in 2 sections. So that's what we're voting on. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none, and all those abstaining, please raise your hand. See nobody on the committee abstaining. Okay, so with that being said, the proposal has been modified. So now we can have further discussion or someone to make another motion. I see Cheryl's hand go up. Cheryl, why don't you go ahead and chat away? Okay, she seconds Scott's motion to strike 906.4 and 9.6.5. Unfortunately, Cheryl, there's not an active motion. Scott would have to make that motion on there. If you want to make that motion, that's fine. Just clarify if that's what you want to do. Not seeing anything. Okay, so there is a motion to strike section 9.6.4 and 9.6.5 made by Cheryl via chat. Any discussion or a second on that?
I second that.
Okay, there's a second by Scott. Any other discussion? I'll ask one more time. Any other discussion? Eric, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I understand the the intent behind proposing the removal of 90164 and 90165. However, I would remind everyone that this is the green code, and these are you know, the teams and the projects that are pursuing these are intentionally looking to go above and beyond. I would hate to see that opportunity lost for a little bit of lack of definition in 90164. And I do recognize, I absolutely agree that 5% may be challenging. But I don't think that we should delete it entirely. And it is a high bar for a project to strive for if they so choose. So all that to say, I'll be voting against the current motion. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Daniel, go ahead.
Would it be too complicated for the committee to consider at this point, just separating, let's say 90165 into a separate credit so that it doesn't get in the way of getting credit for what's above, but does offer an additional opportunity?
Sure. So I'll ask Cheryl, since she made the motion, and Scott at the second, and the rest of the committee can comment on it too. Cheryl, would you be up for separating 901.6.5? I'm good with that modification. Okay, so she's okay with separating out 901.6.5 into a different section. Scott, are you okay with that? Seconded. Okay, and just to clarify, we would still, Cheryl, just your intent, you would still want to delete 901.6.4, or would you like to keep that? Okay, so she would still want to delete 901.6.4 and then make the 901.6.5 a separate section. Scott, are you good with that? Okay, I see the thumbs up. All right, and we can vote on those separately. Any further discussion? Okay, so what we'll do, since we have kind of two different motions here, or two different things that can get kind of hairy, I'm going to call a vote on the first item of business, which would be to break out section 901.6.5 into its own section. And I think we're able to do that. I'm not 100% sure. So City and County of Denver, please let me know if we're able to do that before I call a vote.
Yeah, we can change format like that. That's fine.
Yep, we can.
Okay, great. So that'll be the first item we vote on. And then the next item would be to delete the section above it. So I'll call a vote for moving 901.6.5 to its own section. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, votes are still coming in. I see 12. Go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed, please raise your hand. 2, go ahead and lower your hands. And all those abstaining. 1. Okay, so that is its own section. So now the next thing we're voting on is to delete section 901.6.4. All those in favor of deleting that, please raise your hand. I see hands still moving. 7, okay, go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed, please raise your hand. 5, go ahead and lower. And all those abstaining, please raise your hand. 1. Okay, so that is a count of 7 to 5 to 1 So that would be deleted based on vote. So let me strike that. All right.
Kevin, I'm sorry to interrupt. I put up my hand not as quickly as everybody else, and I think it was actually 7 to 6 to 1. It shifted to 6 at
Okay.
the end because of me being slow with my finger.
I gotcha. Okay. So let's, just for simplicity's sake, let's call a revote here just to make sure.
Sorry.
All those in favor of deleting 901.6.4, please raise your hands. Okay. Last call. I see 6. Okay, go ahead and lower your hands. Antonio, your hand's still up, so I'm going to lower it for you. Okay, all those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, I see last call. I see 6. Go ahead and lower your hands. Lower your hand. Okay, and all those abstaining, please raise your hand. 2. Okay, so in that case, it does not get taken out. So let me undo this real quick. Okay, all right. So we have basically 2 items, one proposal, but two sections, if you will. 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, and a new section of 6.5. Kristen, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm getting tired and I said that there were 5 sections, but there's 4. So sorry about that, Scott. It's the end of
No worries. All right. So is there a motion? Does anybody want to make a motion on this, a further motion? There's opportunities to accept, we reject, we make further changes. Eric, go ahead.
Mr. Moderator, point of order, are we voting on just the 3 subsections and we'll vote on 90165 separately, or are we voting on both of these? Can you provide some clarification?
Sure. So no motion yet, but let's split it out. Let's since these are 2 separate sections now, that's a good call. If someone would to make a motion to handle the first few sections, and we can do that first, and then we can handle the last section on there. Eric, go ahead.
I make a motion to approve the first 3 sections, 901, 62, 63, and 64 as amended.
Okay. Is there a second? Daniel, go ahead.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Scott, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So those 3, the motion on the amended, what was amended? I thought what was amended was the 4th one, which has been approved to be broken out.
So there was in section number 5, or 6.5, the amendment was to add the term "or reused" in 2 areas.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And that section is now broken out separately. Okay. All right. Any other discussion? I'm going to lower your hand because I'll call a vote. So what we're voting on, there's a motion to approve the first few sections here. I'm going to try and highlight it on the screen for you so you know what you're voting on. Kristen, do you have a point of order here real quick?
Yeah, I do. So in the original proposal, we had 3 of the 4 sections to comply with. And now since we only have 3 sections, is that correct? We will need to amend that.
Sure. And that is just to delete this D category highlighted, correct? And I think that's just the admin item. Eric, go
yes.
ahead.
Yes, but we'd have to that would be 3 out of 3, right? So if you want to amend the 3 to say 2, it's up to you.
Gotcha. Okay, Eric, you got a comment?
Yes, I moved to modify, actually, I guess, where are we at? Maybe I need to, do I need to withdraw my motion, or should I just move to amend?
Sure,
that?
let's go.
Two of the
Yeah,
three.
let's go. Okay. It's 2 of the 3. Okay. And Daniel, I believe you are the second. Are you okay with that?
I am, but you don't need of the 3. You have still of the following, and we can take out D, right? Because D is anyhow coming out. Correct? From this specific
2 of the
election,
following.
and then strike D.
I think that
correct,
still
Eric?
makes it exact. Being a head nod. Okay. All right.
And I second that modification.
Okay, great. Okay, so it is to approve with the amendment of striking D out of that and adding 2 of the following in there. And so I hope everybody's clear. If it's not clear what you're voting on, please raise your hand now, because I know it's kind of confusing. That's okay if you are confused. We can walk through it again. Okay, seeing that nobody is confused, I'll call a vote. All those in favor of approving as amended the first portion of this proposal, please raise your hand. Hand still moving. And I will call a final count of 11. Go ahead and lower your hands. All those opposed, same sign. 1. Go ahead and lower your hands. And all those abstaining. I see 1. Go ahead and lower your hands. Okay. So that first section is approved as amended. So now we will call, if there's a motion to approve as amended the last section there, we can call a vote. Anybody want to make a motion? Eric?
I move to approve as amended.
Okay, is there a second? Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I'll do a final count of 13. Go ahead and lower your hands. I believe that's all of them, but just to make sure. All those opposed, same sign. 1. Okay, lower your hand. And all those abstaining. 0. Okay, so that passes. All right, so it is 9 or 9. It is 4:49. I do not want to start a new one with only 11 minutes left, because we usually take longer than that. So out of respect of everybody's time, we will call the meeting for this. I believe we have one more hearing left. So thank you all for joining today. As always, I'll stay on the line for you to complain or anything else that you want to give feedback on. We'll stay on the line for a little bit. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks, Kevin.
Has there been any discussion about us potentially doing our last meeting in person?
There has not, and at this point in